many of us ever know what it is to become the perfect version of ourselves.
This is Decoding Superhuman with your host, Boomer Anderson.
Superhumans, Boomer Anderson, back with another episode of the Decoding Superhuman podcast. I'm here in Europe, about ready to head off to the US, but going to be back this summer for a number of different conferences that are going on here in Europe on the human performance front. These ones are specifically in the realm of biohacking, but I view biohacking as a tool, if you will, to optimize and achieve and sustain higher performance states. So the first of those conferences is FlowFest in Munich on the 5th to the 7th of July. I will definitely be there. The next is the Health Optimization Summit, which is happening in London on the 14th and 15th of September. And then the third is the 5th year anniversary of the Biohacker Summit, which is happening on November 1st and 2nd. But in case you've tuned into the show for a while now, you know that I spent a little bit of time in Riga, Latvia, at the Baltic's largest biohacking conference, where I talked about the N of One society. And I've continued the conversation with the organizers there because I really, really love what they're doing. And one of the organizers is the guest on today's show. His name is Kaspars Vendelis, and he's the co-founder of the Biohacking Latvia movement community and organizer of the largest biohacking conference in the Baltics, the one I just presented at. He's the creator and founder of a 3-day live program and online program Restarts for synchronizing brain, nervous system, and life purpose. He calls himself a Renaissance man. I love it. He's a serial entrepreneur, healthy lifestyle, and top performance promoter. He promotes the systemic involvement or systemic improvement of well-being by science, technology, and nature. He emphasizes the one neglected area of biohacking, which is the social aspect, and he's an author, communicator, public speaker, and mentor of strategies to self-improvement, to high performance, to longevity through mental models. And that's actually the topic of today's conversation is mental models, because we've had this a little bit on the show with Justin Nope before, but we've never really done a deep dive on mental models. And mental models are fascinating to me because, well, one of the people that I look up to the most is Charlie Munger. And he's always said that mental models were the way he evaluates companies. And if you look at mental models in general and studied any of Charlie Munger, you realize that a lot of that doesn't involve value investing. It involves more tricks and mental models as well as heuristics to get through the investment process. So what did we talk about on the show? Well, if you can't guess, we did talk about mental models. We talked about biohacking and how Kaspars got into biohacking. We talked about our favorite mental models, each of us, mine being probably cognitive bias, and you'll have to tune in to find out what Kaspars is. We get into those in detail, and we give you all of the tips, tricks, and resources that you can use to really find out more and more about mental models. The show notes for this one can be found at decodingsuperhuman.com/Kaspars. That's Kaspars. And enjoy my episode with Kaspars Vendelis. All right, the sponsor for today's podcast is a member of the toolkit that I use on an almost daily basis to upgrade my state of being and have used it actually for the past couple of years. The guys over at Neurohacker Collective have done a fantastic job. You've heard me rave about the original stack as well as Qualia Mind on the show. But now I'm so excited because the suite of products has grown. You have Qualia Focus for that near-term bump. You have Qualia Mind Caffeine Free for all my caffeine-sensitive listeners out there. But their latest product, which just came out, is oh so exciting. It's called Eternus, and it's a 38-ingredient formula containing the most researched and premium ingredients on Earth for supporting cellular health. This is key to combating the symptoms of aging. If you want to check out Eternus, Qualia Mind, Focus, or any of the Neurohacker products, go over to neurohacker.com and plug in the code BOOMER. You'll get an additional 15% off your order. Enjoy. Kaspars, my friend, welcome to the show.
Oh, good to be here. I'm pretty excited about this.
This is going to be a lot of fun. You and I met at a conference that you actually organize, which is Biohacking Latvia. Do you mind just giving people a little bit of a high level overview of that conference? Because it was an amazing experience for me, and I think everybody should hear about it.
Well, yeah, that was already the second year in a row that we organized the biohacking conference. And the reason being, well, in general, why we do this conference is that, yeah, and it's basically all over the place when you look at the people and communities that what you see, you don't get a nice picture about the people's health and overall condition in general. What medicine can offer is very often insufficient. So, and basically, me and my two co-founders came together and decided that we have some basic skills, a little bit of knowledge, and moreover, we want to learn even more to create a community, to create a platform where people can reach out and basically, people don't feel free only because they don't have the tools available for making themselves feel better, do better things. And all we wanted to do is actually to create a platform where those tools could be made available to them. And the conference is actually one part of it. And so because we lack experts, we lack knowledge and let's say worldview about what can be done in general. That's why we wanted to make this conference also internationally significant, and that's why we invited many speakers from abroad like yourself who could share the perspective, the knowledge, and introduce us to new concepts, new ideas.
That's amazing. So I have to ask this question because I'm always curious, Kaspers. How did you get into biohacking yourself?
Because everything was just perfect and everything was just great. Everything was so good. And I just couldn't believe everything can be so good. No, of course. As we all know that after the age of 30, everything just gets worse. Like nothing really gets better. And when you also start seeing things around with your own body and what happens to your relatives, to your people that surround you, you kind of see. And my short story is that I found myself at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m., watching a TV series with a vodka glass in my hand, and didn't like the picture.
Mhm.
So and I feel lucky that I realized that. So for some people, this realization even doesn't occur. For me, it came true, and I just decided, I need to quit doing this, because when you're 20 or 25, you can get away with it.
Mhm.
When you're 35, less so. And I started thinking, when I'm get 40 or 45, I would be able even for less. So I just quit doing this and started reading things, and actually kind of accidentally stumbled upon some podcasts. That was 5 years ago. I actually didn't know what that podcast actually is. So, but then I started consuming as much as I could, and within those 5 years, I would say only from podcasts I learned as if I could have done 3 times higher education, like university. That much information, and because I actually very much like podcasts, because audio format is one that we can actually use. The sense of listening is so universal that we spend so much time being in transition from point A to point B. I don't know, washing dishes, peeling potatoes, doing whatever unnecessary and sometimes also necessary stuff, and you can listen to whatever you want, to audiobooks, podcasts, within the consume so much information that I just couldn't stop. And after some while, I decided actually I can share this information with somebody else, and that's how we started doing some lectures, seminars, meetups, and eventually the conference. So that's how I became biohacker. Vodka in your hand, that turns you into a
It all
biohacker.
starts with vodka, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So on that, how big are the meetups in Latvia now? Because the conference was several hundred people, right? It was pretty large. It's the largest conference in the Baltics, right?
Each of us, we are three co-founders, as I said, and each of us have their own small audiences and communities, and we try to get them as much as possible to all them together. And of course, the concepts that we promote actually are very, very attractive to people, because everyone kind of feels something's missing in their lives. Everything's sort of good, everything's fine, but the central heating does its job, and the full fridges of food does their job, So we started by small events with doing some meetups, some small gatherings, but very soon we realized that in order to make this community sustainable and basically stronger, we have to sell tickets to those meetups, because otherwise, as you know, with Facebook, you can see hundreds and thousands of different events taking place in one city, let alone the whole world. And because they are so available and everyone seems to now doing some events, we decided we have to switch to the paying models so that they are kind of a little bit invested. So this is how we could provide also more value and gain more traction because of that. And we started doing some also PR events, like half naked run through the city during the winter time. Then we did also record number of people being in one, when you open the hole in the lake during the winter time. So we did the record number of people being in the water at the same time.
So this is frozen water, by the way, for everybody.
Yeah. That's totally like 4 degrees Celsius, but ice and everything like that. So this is how we started, and you are frightened to go into the water, but when you come out, you kind of feel so relieved, so good. And it doesn't take many times to realize that biohacking, or it's called thermogenesis and things like that, has something to it. So this is how more and more people turned up to the events, and eventually also many hundred people to the conference.
So I want to get into mental models, but before we do that, the theme for this year's conference was longevity. Do you mind, in your own words, just kind of 3 quick things people can do to enhance their longevity?
Actually, the 3 things could be summed up in one sentence, except I would add in the brackets the 4th thing, which is actually sometimes neglected in the field of biohacking. But those 3 first things would be, they are totally related to one's individual that you can do by yourself. That is little hungry, little cold, and lifting heavy weights. Basically, little cold means thermogenesis, and we know that people used to be more in cold, especially we white people coming from the northern part of the world. Being hungry, I would even say that before we got fridges, people used to walk around a little bit more starved than they are today. And recently, I just was into the one relative gathering, big family gathering, and I was astonished. Like 90% of people being there have had overweight, like stomachs, like bellies, like that. And this is not because they are eating too much carbs. What very often carbs are blamed. It's just eating too much. You are constantly exposed to food. That's doing harm. And the third thing, lifting weights, is important because this is how you strengthen your nervous system, your bone density, your muscle mass. And this 4th thing that I mentioned that need to be said, but very often is left outside, is the social aspect.
Mm-hmm.
You can do whatever you want individually, but if you have not the right environment set in place that supports your being cold, being hungry, and lifting weights, you're not going to do that. That's why it needs to be said. So all those three things need to be done with other people. That's basically it.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so in my research of you, you do a lot of work and research into mental models. And this is a topic I've wanted to talk about forever on the show because I'm very interested in it as well.
I hope I'm gonna do justice to your hopes.
No, I'm sure you will. Kaspars, I've come to know you as both very intelligent and articulate, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Let's talk first. What is a mental model?
Okay, to describe it simply is that it's like a switch. And since we're not in any harsh environments anymore, which means we are in a constant comfort zone the whole time, but our genetics, as you might know, is still made for us as if we still lived in like in ancient times, like in Paleolithic times, or something like this. Of course, there have been some adaptations to our genetics, but in overall, our nervous system and everything like that still works the same way as it was like many thousand years ago. Therefore, this our body or our programmed biology gives us some signals to our consciousness that need not to be there in a way that we kind of think the life should be. For instance, if you fall unconscious because you're standing in front of the audience on the stage, like speaking engagement or something like this, you fall unconscious not because you chose to do so. It's your nervous system mistakenly perceived the signal that it's so dangerous, in fact, that you might die if I don't switch your consciousness off. So you fall off. That's how strong this thing is. And even though I'm taking cold showers each morning, and each morning my inner voice, I don't know, lizard brain tells to me, "Oh man, you're gonna die. Don't do that." And it gives you anything just to find a justification for not doing this cold shower. Like for instance, I had a little cold, something like voice like that, and it instantly popped into my mind, like, man, not today. Okay, maybe you're not dying, but this definitely is not worth it. So keep off. But the mental model in this case would be, that being in the cold is like lifting weights for your nervous system. And basically, for instance, I live in a country in Latvia where in the warmest year, which was 2015, the average temperature, I don't know how it's in American in this Fahrenheit, but in Celsius, it was 7 degrees, plus 7 degrees.
7.
Like the average temperature.
Wow. So that's roughly that's slightly below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and that was the warmest year ever in our country.
Wow.
Which means it's like constantly cold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, and instead of saying to yourself, what in a shitty climate I'm living, and not only it's cold, it's raining very often, not so many sunshiny days and things like that. And instead of saying to yourself, man, I'm totally unsatisfied with my life only because of the climate and because you cannot change it, you can switch this switch and say to yourself, every time I feel this, this shivering cold when it's like in November, it's like very bad. You say to yourself, although I might feel cold, I like that because this is doing good for my nervous system. It's like doing push-ups or pull-ups or whatever. Not that everybody would enjoy doing push-ups. You do that because it's sort of a figural replacement for doing hard work so that you get stronger. And mental model in this case would be a switch, how you change your attitude. This is how you overcome your biases. This is how you overcome your pre-programmed limitations. Basically, not in short, but as simple as possible. I explained you how I see what mental model is.
Beautiful. And so you highlighted one in terms of getting over fear of cold. What other examples can you think of in terms of mental models where we can use them, particularly in the domain of performance, top performance type people?
Okay. It's actually quite easy. One of the top mental models, which again might sound so simplistic to many people, but not actually that easy to implement or to use the switch, to use the analogy, is that everything that is good takes long time. I've done some seminars, some speeches in front of the business incubators, accelerators, and places like that, where they have some new startuppers and young entrepreneurs. And I asked them this question: How long are you in this accelerator? How long are you a startup owner? And then 3 months, 4 months, whatever. And then the next question is, how long do you think it will take for you to get the first paying customer, or even to make your company be a profitable one? And this is incredible what they say. They say like maybe 6-7 months or so. And then I usually ask in the audience if there are some guys, people that would have the company for 3 to 5 years. And usually there are some. And then I ask, how long did it actually take to get some first paying customers? And some of them even say, I don't see this thing even in the horizon, even though I'm running the business 5 years. So basically, we are so obsessed with the results very fast, like instantly. But at the same time, we have in us inbuilt capacity to actually take things also that they prove to get some results also in a longer perspective. Like, for instance, do you like basil and mozzarella and tomatoes?
Who doesn't, right?
All right.
Delicious.
Yeah. So I can show you here. I grow a few plants here
Beautiful.
For basil. When I put the seed in the pot, it usually takes a few weeks until I see something green coming out of the soil. And I somehow don't demand, I want mozzarella tomorrow. It doesn't come out like that. The same thing goes with grounding a new family. I haven't heard that a husband would demand from his wife to get the son in within 2 months, right? So it takes on average 9 months. So basically, everything that we really take as a valuable thing takes long time. This is a very valuable, actually, a mental model, especially for health related issues, because people don't get fat within 2 weeks, and why should they expect that now it's like middle of May for the beach season, let's do some work and get fit again, no, sorry, doesn't work that way. If you want to be fine, slim, really fit, takes long time. And which brings me to the next mental model, is that 1 degree change. When you make this 1 degree change, then usually if me and you start walking with a difference in vector with 1 degree, very long time we're going almost together. But after some while, we are like getting farther and farther from each other. And basically, if you combine those two things, like very good things take a long time with 1 degree change, but and for the longevity especially, you have all the time in the world. It's a lie that the life is short. It's actually long if you start enjoying the processes. So when you are going to the gym and lifting weights, you don't expect your biceps to be big tomorrow, right? So you kind of prepare yourself and make yourself in a waiting mode. If that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I'm going to continue picking at these because these are fantastic. I think you touched on 2 points that I really like to utter to all of our clients or reiterate to all of our clients, which is just, everything good takes a long time and take baby steps. You don't have to change overnight, but that 1% vector, as you say, over a period of 3 months, 6 months, 10 years is going to make a huge difference. Awesome. Awesome. So I want to keep drilling down on these mental models because I think there's ways that we can apply them for decision making, or at least in my studies. Do you mind just going through some of the mental models that you've used to help your decision making and thought process better?
One thing that I like as well is these help to get familiar with uncertainty. Like, for instance, and not that you become more certain, it's just that uncertainty now is explained to you why it's okay to be uncertain. And one of the mental model that I like is pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is also very useful especially when you learn. And it comes into waves. And pattern recognition is something that, like, you see some pattern, okay? Doesn't make sense. You don't see what that is actually. But when you take a little step back from it, all of a sudden you now see what that actually is. Turns out it's an eye of an animal, of a human being or whatever. But then it's an eye. What sense does it make again? But when you take step back, then you see, oh, it's a head, it's a face. And so you can remove yourself and take a look at the bigger and bigger picture. And the farther from the pattern you go away, the more sense it makes. But it actually never makes sense because there's no limits to how far you can go from the pattern that you see. And how I observe that is same example with listening to podcasts. First, I jumped into the biohacking and health related things, and gosh, man, oh my God, I will never be able to understand what they are talking about. But then you start hearing the same things here and there, and more people start about that. And not that more people start talking about that, it's just that you start understanding that more. You start relating concepts to each other. And but then again, you start understanding some before thought complicated things. Now you understand them. But again, it comes another wave. You again kind of dig deeper, and then you again notice that you don't know a thing, and that comes again and again and actually never ends.
Sounds like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So have you heard the Dunning-Kruger effect? Yeah.
Yes. The more you know, the more you think you don't know. And basically, this is the circle of knowledge, the bigger that gets, the more area with the unknown there is, it's something like that. Yeah, but to deal with this Dunning-Kruger effect, pattern recognition mental model is very helpful because it encourages you to not stop because you've been there. You understand that it's just totally normal that you don't understand that thing. You just keep pushing. If you can make a pull-up only 5 times, you can be totally sure that if you keep doing, you will be able to do a 6th time, a 7th time, and things like that. So this is a pattern recognition. And the reason why there are a few studies in universities and some academic studies that it takes long time to recognize the patterns, like medicine. There are so many terms that actually are interrelated, but when you are in the first year, you kind of think, oh man, that's impossible. The second year, you hear the new concepts. The knowledge is so vast that it will take time.
So, Kaspars, what's the relation between, if this is a question that's a little off base, we'll just delete it, but the relation between mental models and heuristics? Because when I think of heuristics, I think of people like Nassim Taleb and those guys. And of course, Shane Parrish is somebody that you and I were talking about earlier. But is there a relationship? Like, are all mental models relation to decision making? And are they all heuristics, or are they different?
Well, I say it's a good question when it's it's not clear how to answer that. But I'd say I may be wrong, and everything that I say is just from my perspective and according to my knowledge. But I would put them more or less in the same category. It's just your preference of how you can call them. Because Nassim Taleb talks about those heuristics, and as far as I know, Daniel Kahneman also uses heuristics as a word, as opposed to mental models. But Warren Buffett uses mental models, although I'm pretty sure he is a fan of heuristic ideas in general. So I would say I wouldn't see the distinction like so clearly in this sense. What do you think?
It's one of those things that, well, I asked the question because I was just kind of seeking clarity on it, but it seems like a blurred line to me. Because if I have up here just some different mental model examples, and they could very easily be heuristics, right? Like things like Occam's razor, for instance. But one of my favorite mental models that I try to actively avoid and put feelers out for is cognitive bias, or at least it's classified some places in cognitive bias, right? And trying to avoid my own biases is one of my favorite mental models.
Okay, isn't it that heuristics is more like a functional approach to some specific things,
Fair enough. Yeah.
but mental model is more like a concept, more like a picture that you can put on top of anything. Like for instance, I actually very much like the mental model that is called, and I took it from. Do you know Dan Sullivan?
I've heard the name before. Refresh my memory.
He's a strategic coach, founder, and friends of Joe Polish, and all this band there.
Yep.
Okay, and his idea was that I take it for me as well as the mental model is that you can wish or you can want anything you want without giving a reason why you want it. And so I wouldn't call it a heuristic. I would call it more like a mental model. And how it works is that we are very much limited, not because we chose so, but because we are so conditioned. Like for instance, and as far as I know, women struggle with that a little bit more than men. Like especially when women want to pursue a career in business or so. But there are very many people around that find it unacceptable because a woman needs to raise children, to be responsible for the house and things like that. But the lady decides, I want this and that. I want a career. I want be traveling as a business lady, first class, or whatever that can be. And most of the time, these also can be items that one can wish for. But then there are so many people asking, why do you want that? It doesn't occur to those people that she could just want it for no particular reason. It's just because she wants so. And because there are some stereotypical attitude towards the roles in society, first a woman decides, or men as well, first decide, okay, I'm going to fabricate the reasons why I want that because you demand the reason. So I don't have any reason, but I just want it. But you demand from me the reason. I just come up with something. And of course, when you come up with something, this is also lying to yourself. And when you lie to yourself, it's like a cognitive dissonance because people don't like to lie to themselves. So they stop coming up with new wishes so that they would not be forced to lie again to anybody and to themselves as well. And this is how they forget wanting anything. And that's why building up a muscle to want something for no particular reason. I have even some master classes where I just offer to people just do 5 items a day, each day, like for 1 month. Come up with anything that you want for no reason. First, nice shoes, dresses, yachts, and things. This is easy, but then you come up with things that are just something whatever. I want to fly to the moon. I want to become a butterfly, whatever. So this is how this is a mental model just to be more creative, to be with bigger visions. People struggle with a big sense of purpose because they are not used to thinking in big worlds.
I love what you just said there in terms of how you give people opportunities to train this by just thinking bigger over the five things over the course of a few days. What are other ways, because some of these things aren't natural in terms of mental models, but they are meant to help us deal with certainty or uncertainty, that is. What are some other ways that we can train these? Because, starting to work some of these in our day-to-day life, especially if we are in this corporate world, which is increasingly more innovative, more volatile, more uncertain, how would you start to incorporate those? You just gave a great example there, so I'm wondering if you have other ones as well.
But it can be also unrelated to mental models as well.
That's true. That's true. So we can have broader applicability for how to train anything.
It's actually training yourself to many things at once. You can train by doing this exercise. It's that you would ask to other people, and that would actually break their patterns as well. First of all, if you ask other people for advice, and I will explain in a moment what exact advice you should be asking for, but first to describe the situation, that when you ask somebody to give advice, they're actually quite flattered about that, because people, that sends a signal that they are appreciated for what they are, for what they know, for their expertise, and so they are very, very open to that. Exceptions may be only if they are very, very busy. It's just a matter of priorities. But if they find time to respond, that would be like so. And the task would be to ask those people. You can choose whoever for whatever role, people to give you advice on how they see what are your strengths. First of all, you have suspicions about yourself, what your strengths are, but not fully aware. Very many people know what they are bad at because they tried many things. Maybe false positive as well, because maybe you haven't tried that sufficient times. But they're pretty sure about what they cannot do. Not so much about what they can do, what the strengths are. So the task would be to ask, I don't know, let's say 5 people, the acquaintances, ex-co-workers, maybe ex-bosses, to give you some advice on what your strengths are. And that could give you a nice perspective on what you should work on. And it gives you also a nice increase in self-awareness, because all of a sudden, first of all, somebody recognized that. Second of all, it supported what you already thought about yourself. But even if it doesn't support, then at least it gives you a new ideas what your strengths are. And anything that somebody gives you what your strength is a like huge boost in your perception about yourself. Because very often people lack this positive self-image only because they failed so many times. And sometimes going back to this 1 degree change in a day, is that sometimes you just need just one slight improvement just to restart believing yourself again. There's actually one nice story that doesn't come from me directly, but I've been told that there was one guy who tells this story. It happened to him, and he says that was when he was age of 14 or something like that. In the school, he sits at his desk. Teacher is walking around. They're doing some exercise or something, and it's Friday, the day before weekend, when his family has left or is planning to leave for a vacation, small vacation. And this guy has planned everything to commit suicide. Like everything is arranged, perfect moment when the parents are away, so he planned everything. But except this one small thing, a teacher walks around the class and stands behind his shoulder, watching what how he's doing the exercise. And she just like pats like 2 times on the shoulder saying, good job, good job. Nothing else, and went. And that was enough for him to start believing again that there is some hope, there is a possibility to do some things again. And that's why this exercise at least will give you not your own, but from the outside perspective, the reasons why you should pursue whatever you started or whatever you wish for. That would be one exercise. And that would be also very functional and practical exercise, because if you wonder, you ask yourself what you should do in terms of I don't know, even though you work in a job that you do already, there are some things that you can even improve further and become even more top edge, the top performer in that one thing. And the problem is, this Joe Polish actually mentions it all the time, that if you try to make your weaknesses stronger, at the end of your life, you become an owner of the perfect weaknesses, and that's why you should pursue you should approach your strengths as opposed to weaknesses, and ignore the weaknesses. They won't disappear. They will be there. It's just that you are going to make your strength so strong that nobody's going to notice that you have weaknesses.
Very well said. Very well said. And one of the things that you're actually rooting out there, going back to the cognitive biases, like, we may think that we're really good at things, but it's nice to go out and solicit that response from people to actually know what we're good at, rather than our own internal perceptions. Fantastic, Kaspars. Where would you recommend people get started on mental models? Because it could be a very big world if you start Googling this stuff. Where would you recommend people get started?
Of course, Shane Parrish, Farnham Street would be one place. This guy has also a podcast with very good interviews. Also, read some of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett stuff. But to be honest, where I first found a lot of interesting things, and basically everything new concepts that I now find out about, I look through the lens of mental models, or how they can be useful in my everyday life. Actually, this is a mental model, like meta mental model by itself, because it makes you see everything through the lens of how I can implement that into my life right now. Not like theoretical knowledge, but like a practical thing. So whatever you see that how it can be applied to your life. And the place where it's a huge amount of mental models, and you start seeing actually patterns. So again, pattern recognition is the platform Quora. Although it's maybe sometimes overused in terms of the questions that they are asked is, how can I get better in 10 minutes that can be useful for the rest of my life? Questions like that, like fast, quick tips. But in those tips, when you start reading them, like really, after some while, you notice some patterns, what people are saying. And this is how it's done about the mental models. I have actually the concept of mental models in 3 ways. I have mental models, or let's call them tricks, mental models philosophically, which would be like the mental switches. Then models that can be used as tools, like for instance, to read faster, you can just point it with finger. So this is how you increase your speed of reading by 25% as well already. These are like the practical tools. And there are also digital tools in terms of using how to improve your life, like mental models. And that would be my best mental model, or model as a tool, is the Evernote application.
Oh, love it. Yeah, it's my brain.
That's absolutely. So if you love it, then probably you have already told about that to your listeners, because it has so many functionalities and it makes your life easier. It's just is so. So there's nothing to add.
No, you can continue on the Evernote. I don't think we've covered it in too much detail, and I know Evernote has a lot of competitors now, so it's I'm interested to see what guys like Notion come out with in the near future too, because Evernote's been very, very effective in my own life.
And I do everything in Evernote, actually.
Yeah, it sounds like you and I can converse in Evernote chat after this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent.
What's your actually regarding the mental models? What would be your like top one, two, maybe three mental models?
And going back to whether or not this is a heuristic or a mental model, but confirmation bias and actively trying to root that out of my life is one of the top things that I've come to employ over the past couple of years. So that could be anything from news sources, making sure that I'm not getting biased news, so news all around the world, to if you and I were talking earlier about how we work with clients and how it's a very data driven approach. Well, that's because I want to root out the cognitive bias that comes with media marketing, with supplement company marketing, etc. All of that, and if you look at the talk that I actually gave in Latvia, all of that was designed around the idea of how we can become more individual and apply it in a proper way by rooting out cognitive bias. So I think overall that's probably the one I would go to the most. But great question. All right, Kaspers. Now I want to transition a little bit into the final four questions. So when we look at the final four questions, we're going to kick things off here with a little bit of going back into the health realm. What do you think? What area needs more attention than it's currently getting?
I'd say physical activities in terms of doing. You should do, I don't know, a few times a week, something in terms of physical activities. And I would say our bodies are designed to move constantly, not 2 times a week or 3 times a week for 1 hour in CrossFit hall. It's more like not 10,000 steps a day, but 300 steps each hour, which means you should implement the movement throughout the day. And if you measure some kind of movements, be that phone or ring or any other device, you should see activities like this each hour, not like this and then maybe something like that. I would say that would be maybe a little bit easier for people also to do, because you in the very beginning you also mentioned this work-life balance, and how to find this balance. And I think it's a myth of finding this, because that kind of makes one versus the another and other. And but the problem is life is something more complicated than that. It's actually quite complex, and you should be doing life and work together. The same thing goes with movements. You should pay attention to your inner organs. You should pay attention to spirituality throughout the day, not like in some chunks of time. So that would be one thing. The other is regarding it. Again, it's food. We also before the conversation started, we chatted about fasting a little bit. It's interesting that people are so obsessed with the right diet, with right foods, be that superfood. Should you eat high fat, low carb, low fat, high carb, carnivore, vegetarian, or whatever? But there are so many different approaches to what you should eat. But there's one thing that is so universal to every single country, every single nationality, religion, everything. Like one thing in common throughout the whole world is fasting. So basically, this is the only one thing that is so common like throughout the world. So that's why implementing fasting in your life is an absolute must. There may be some exceptions with some health conditions, But overall, that would be one thing that people should do more. And again, actually, to add one thing to food, to nutrition in general, is that I actually very much like when somebody can talk about nutrition, about food in general, not mentioning one single food item. And that would be the second thing that I would add to food, would be that you can even keep eating whatever you want, even fast food or whatever. But the thing you should do is eat slower.
Yeah, that's very, very well
Just
said.
eating slower. That's it. That's it. Because when you eat fast, you don't get out of the sympathetic nervous system from the fight or flight mode. But the digestion has, as the name says, you need to be in rest and digest. So, and if you eat like a meal within 5 to 7 minutes, it doesn't absorb. Even if you eat hamburgers, some French fries, it even that doesn't get absorbed because you eat just in the wrong mode of your body.
Let's transition now, because I think you may be biased on this one, but what's your top trick for enhancing focus?
For me, it's two things that work in combination perfect. Before each speech, when I do keynotes or so, or if I do some focusing, like really sharp focus on my, I don't know, some cognitive tasks on my computer, it's basically not eating for the 24 hours before. It really, but that is very important to mention, that if you eat pretty high carb diet, fasting in general would be harder to do. So lower carb would actually help to enhance these benefits. So that would be 24-hour fast, plus if working at my computer, it's binaural beats. Nothing beats binaural beats. It's unbelievable. I get in the zone quite fast. I don't know if it's really the beats per se, or is it that I conditioned myself
Yeah,
to be.
exactly.
It's really hard to tell, but that stuff works.
Let's talk a little bit about books now. So, what book has significantly impacted your life and your ability to show up and perform in it?
Can I give you a little bit unconventional answer to that?
Please do.
To avoid, like the same thing as with nutrition, to avoid any specific food, I would avoid any specific book. But I would say one book that changed everything for the best is my wife giving me as a gift Kindle, Amazon Kindle.
Okay. So now you have access to every book in the world.
Exactly, and why it worked as the life changer is because like that happened 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, and after my high school and after university, I just somehow didn't read anymore, like really didn't read anything. But this was gift in the right time at the right place, and I just opened this. It's exciting to have a gadget in your hand, and this one click thing just started everything. This is how actually everything started. And if you ask me about how I became a biohacker, I didn't want to tell you at that moment about the Kindle. So because I somehow thought maybe it would be better to mention that at some point in the interview. But now is the time, actually, the Amazon Kindle. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love my Kindle too. And the fact that you can export your notes to Evernote is incredible. Awesome. Kaspars, where can people find out more about this year's conference, the videos, as well as next year's conference?
It's biohacking. It's quite easy. Biohacking.lv. LV stands for Latvia. And if you use the /EN, which stands for English, because we very much focus on Latvians, but because we still get attention from outside, as we said before, it was in the biggest conference in the Baltics, we keep the thing in English as well. And the next year's conference theme is top performance. So everything you should find out about that, you can find it in biohacking.lv. And can I also plug the tickets and everything?
Please do plug everything.
Yeah. So, because this top performance still in May, we have the early bird tickets for the next year's April conference, 3 and 4 of April. So to get the early bird tickets, you can go right there.
Beautiful. April 3rd and 4th, 2020 already.
2020, yes,
That's
top
going to be
performance.
top performance. I hope to be there right alongside you, my friend. Where can people find out more about you?
Yet, if you go to my surname, kasparsvendelis.com, you will find everything in Latvian, but it's only for a few months more. I will have everything in English as well. So right now, better is to go to biohacking.lv.
Perfect. So
Or LinkedIn profile. I mean, that's the easiest one.
Yeah. What we'll do is we'll include a link in the show notes to all of this stuff. And the show notes will be at decodingsuperhuman.com/Kaspars. But Kaspars, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time and educating us on mental models, longevity, heuristics, and so many more things. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, my friend.
What would you tell? What would be your one key takeaway from today's conversation?
Investigate more about mental models. I think my key takeaway is to start looking more into pattern recognition, for sure.
Thanks for inviting me, and hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Superhumans, before you go, 2 asks from me. Number 1, if you can head over to iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts and just give us a 5-star rating, it really helps get the word out. Number 2, if you can give us a little feedback, send us an email at podcast@decodingsuperhuman.com. Those of you that have actually taken advantage of this know that I read and respond to each one. Thank you so much for listening, and have an absolutely epic day.